overall, like, why is Remembrance Day significant to you? Like, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, when you first joined the army, you know, I was 16 years old, and my reserve regiment then was the 2nd Field Regiment in Montreal, and it had a tradition on around Remembrance Day that they would take the whole unit would go to a large veterans hospital that was outside near Montreal in Vaudreuil, Quebec, and we would all be given a room to go to with a small gift to give to a veteran. And you know, that's kind of like when I started to really realize the importance of that. You know, I'm still a teenager really at 16, and you know, you see Remembrance Day ceremonies on TV and stuff, but in my family there's no real tradition with military service. My grandfather, great-grandfather, they were farmers, and they were exempt from military service because of the essential farming they had to do back then. So there were really no military tradition in my family. My father was not, you know, never served in the army. No one really in my extended family had served in the army except for an uncle. So it was really at the time, obviously in the army, the Remembrance Day ceremony is very important. And then you start to realize, you know, as I was visiting through these veterans hospital, you know, you have old men who are, you know, who were in hospital because they were in poor health or they had lost their limbs in the war and stuff, and they were very touched by the gesture. And then you know, you kind of really start to understand the gravity and the you know, the sacrifice that they left there as very, very young men. Didn't know when they were going to come back. And talking about World War II veterans, but you know, that would apply to World War I and the Korean War, of course. You know, to me, that's when I really started to understand the significance of Remembrance Day, and that's why it's so important to me. And that, you know, obviously after my experiences in Afghanistan, even more.
So, like, you know, like before you were deployed, I know you mentioned that you signed up at 16 to be in the military, and you know, how would you consider yourself before being deployed? Like, what sort of personality or what sort of persona did you have?
I don't know. I think I'm very I'm a very calm person. I'm compassionate. I think that never changed. Even police work, you know, my own father would say, because my sister's a police officer as well, and so is my brother-in-law. And my father would always say, "You're not like your brother or your sister or your brother-in-law. You're much more calm. You seem to be more compassionate." You know, even though I'm a police officer, I think I kept that, and I think a lot of that comes from my service in the army. The peacekeeping tour I did in Bosnia Herzegovina changed my life. It really did. You know, going to another country. This is a country that was war-torn, you know, destruction everywhere, a lot of hatred, you know, between ethnic groups and also religious, you know, different faiths, you know, fighting each other and stuff, Muslims and, you know, and Catholics and everything. And there was a lot of suffering there. You could see it. The people that worked in the camp, local population did work in our camp. You know, some of them were, you know, a bank manager who now reduced to washing dishes in an army camp because, you know, the infrastructure was destroyed. She lost her job. Her husband had been killed in the fighting over there. You know, I met a lot of people like that. Spent time in schools there where children are, you know, receiving instruction in the hallways of the school because the classroom was too dangerous because stray bullets would fly into the classroom. There was no electricity. We spent time in hospitals there, like a hospital where a lot of mental patients were, and you know, the whole staff had been in the hospitals for weeks on end because of the heavy fighting, and then the patients were left to fend for themselves, and they were malnourished. You know, there was no electricity anymore in the hospital and stuff. So I did see a lot of suffering there and stuff, and I took that back home with me. I was still a relatively young man there. This was 1995, so I was 32 years old with some young children of my own. And I don't know, I took that back home, and you realize how fortunate you are to live in Canada, to be born here and raised here. And I don't know, it's something that stayed with me, and it created a compassion in me that I always kept for the rest of my life, and everything that I do, police work and stuff. You do meet some unfortunate people that find themselves in tough situations, and sometimes it's some fault of their own, but everyone can have a bad day, and I never hated anyone, and I always treated everyone with respect and compassion, because a lot of that had to do with my experiences in Bosnia.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I can't imagine what it might be like to witness that firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
When you first found out you were going to go to Afghanistan, was there any thoughts running through your head? Were you scared? What were you feeling when you?
Yeah, I mean, when you are a soldier, and I had been a soldier for many years, when I decided to volunteer, that's what it's a bit of a twisted thing, you train, and that's what you do, and you kind of get excited at the thought of someday being called to go to war, and you shouldn't be like that, but I guess it's human nature. You're proud to be a soldier. That's your job. The government wants you to train to be ready for that, so you're kind of always hoping to have an opportunity. And then all of a sudden, I had an opportunity. And first, when I was told, I was very excited about it. But, in the days leading to the time it was actually time to get on the plane and go, I started to get, obviously a little bit apprehensive. My parents, my brother, sister, they were calling me saying, hey, they were obviously very worried. And the day that I left the house, my youngest son was 16 years old. We had gone through some problems, him and I, behavioral problem and stuff. And then, things were still kind of very tense. And he said to me, I'll never forget, he says, I hope you're not leaving because of me. All these emotions. And then you start to think about, well, what if I don't come back? What if I get injured and stuff? And so it was very, very much, on the whole, it takes about 24 hours to get to Afghanistan, various stops along the way and flying across the ocean and all that. But, so you do very much think about these things constantly. You're a bit full of what the future will bring. I obviously I had no wish to die or to serve.
Yeah.
Not to come back grievously injured. I always thought about that young soldier I was telling you about that I met in Dundas. He was a very, very young guy. He was in a wheelchair clearly for the rest of his life. His friends were hanging out after the parade with him. They had their skateboards with them, and they, happy-go-lucky teenagers with not a care in the world. And then, here he was in his uniform, and, you could tell that he longed for, kind of was robbed of his young years, and so that stays with you, and you say, well, I surely hope I'm not going to end up like that. I hope,
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, things like that can definitely, have a big impact on you. And I know you mentioned, when you were younger, you were kind of always trying to find that opportunity to volunteer, and you saw the man in the wheelchair. So before you went to war, did you think that war was going to have any sort of significant change in your life after you came back, originally before you went?
To be honest, I would say no. I didn't think that, I felt I was a mature individual by that point. I'm in my 40s, and I felt that I was very strong psychologically. In doing police work, you do come across some very tragic things, some traumatic events as well. So I thought I was kind of very prepared for that. And I didn't think that I would be affected, but you know, as it turns out, you know, yes, there are some things that stay with you psychologically, that you know, I'd be lying if I said that I don't have some, you know, some things that affect me on an emotional and psychological level. I'm fortunate, you know, there's some soldiers who suffer from serious post-traumatic stress from experiences in war. For me, I would say I do suffer to a certain extent, but not to a level that it hasn't robbed me of, it hasn't affected me to the point where I wouldn't be able to work or anything like that. You know, I did come back to my job and was able to function. And I would say, you know, in my day-to-day life, I function normal, you know, but, you know, there are some small triggers that bring those things back to the surface from time to time. And especially around Remembrance Day time there, you know, this is when you reflect about, some of the things that happened there. I do speak in high schools and elementary schools about my experiences and stuff. And very often I get emotional when I talk about certain specific incident because they've stayed with me and they do still affect me a decade later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think just kind of jumping off of that, what is one like big thing, like one really big thing that you experienced in you know, when going to war and all these tours you did that still has a big impact on you today?
So there were two things, and I would say in, you know, specific, you know, there was an incident there where we, you know, I worked in an operations center there, and where an attack was conducted with a drone on a group of enemy combatant, and you know, you go on YouTube and things like that, you can see videos of these things, you know, some drone attacks and things like that. But when it happens live in front of your eyes, it's you know, it was a bit of a shock, I would say, because, you know, there were some reactions there that, you know, there was some cheering, you know, we just killed 8 enemy and stuff. But, you know, at the back of my mind was, yes, they are, you know, enemy combatant, but they're still human beings with families of their own, you know, and so I have to say, like, I was conflicted. You know, we were there to fight a war. They were enemy. They were trying to kill us, and so our job was to kill them. But I still, the thought of taking human life was difficult for me to come to terms with, you know, on a psychological level. So that was, you know, one of the incidents that affected me a lot. And then the other one was the death of a particular soldier in July 2008. At that point, I'm about 2.5 months into my tour. It's, you know, it starts to be long, you miss your family and stuff. And my oldest son was in the army at the time. And then all of a sudden, in July 2008, a young soldier by the name of Colin Wilmot was killed in Afghanistan. He was 24 years old. He was the same age as my son, my oldest son, who was in the army. And he was 20, you know, just 24 years old at the time, and he was a medical technician. So his job wasn't even to fight, you know, his job was to provide first aid to injured soldiers, and a lot of the work they did there was actually provide first aid and medical aid to the local population. You know, people that were sick or had some injuries, whatever. You know, the soldiers would walk in village. You're trying to make friends, I guess, and his job, you know, was to help. You know, he's a medical technician. It's a vocation to me, and you know, he's killed by an improvised explosive device, you know, on an attack. And he, like I said, he was the same age as my son. He physically a lot like him too, and I just feel this death was very senseless. I cannot I have very much difficulty coming to terms with why somebody like that needed to die. And yeah, so that's one of the incident.
I mean, I definitely agree. I feel like a lot of the times, you know, like especially in war, a lot of people, that's often the feeling that they feel. It's like when they have someone close to them in their troops, or you know, like they don't understand the reason behind it. And I know you, you know, that you were talking about like these instances, these stories, right? And so when these events occurred, did you feel any change in your persona? Did you feel like you were changing? A part of you had changed?
Not immediately, obviously, but it's certainly gradually. Yes, you know, like I think you can probably tell I'm still very emotional about that stuff. So I would say 100%. So I can only imagine when we have soldiers who witness, you know, their comrade in arms dying right beside them, their very best friend, you know, when they die right beside them, you know, I can only imagine the impact of that. That hasn't, thank God, happened to me. But like, I totally understand why some soldiers, you know, beginning in, you know, first, you know, all armed conflicts, but, you know, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Afghanistan, we have soldiers suffering from post-traumatic stress as a result of witnessing things that a human being should not witness in their life.
Yeah. I think definitely it would definitely impact you, and obviously after you return home, you're a different person because you've experienced all these things. So how would you compare yourself after returning home compared to like before you were deployed or you went?
So I think I adjusted, you know, pretty well. From time to time, my wife might disagree, you know, but I didn't need to seek some help. I'm not ashamed to say that. At the outset of my return, I needed to speak to some professional, you know, to help deal with these things. Otherwise, I mean, it's changed me in the sense that I you know, I was already a compassionate person. I think I've been even more so. You know, I do have a soft heart for, you know, the downtrodden and the people that you know, don't have the privilege that we enjoy here, and you know, the fact that we can, you know, live in a secure, you know, country where everyone has the right to go to school and everyone has, you know, the right, the opportunity to pursue what they want to do, you know. So when I like to keep up to date on world events and stuff like that, and then I do, you know, was there armed conflict in the world and stuff, and these are things that I care about, because I can only imagine, you know, having lived it to a certain extent, the what these people are going through. So I do have a lot of compassion for people that you know, that are caught in these situations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned, you know, like that you saw some small changes, you know, like especially when you came back, right? Like there was certain things that maybe like whether like they were little or, you know, a little insignificant. You know, like why do you think was it, like where did they come, like those changes from? Like was it from your trauma, or, you know, was it from things like, you know, like things that still continued to affect you after the war?
Yeah, 100% for sure. I mean, I know I kind of started to develop sleep disorder after my mission there. To this day, I have to sleep with a machine, you know, because I don't sleep well, and it's part of the reason why I had to leave the army as well. Is just I couldn't sleep well anymore, and I still to this day have difficulty with sleep. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I've become more sensitive to incidents like that. They you know, these are things that I brought back with me, and whenever the subject arises of you know, death and especially soldiers and stuff like that, it affects me more than I think it should, and I think that's just one of how I've been changed from my experiences there.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can see why your sleep would be sleep quality would go down for sure. But after returning home, I know you talked about like your wife not disagreeing with you that you haven't changed, but did you yourself recognize that there may have been problems and traumas that you were dealing with that had a significant toll on your mental health individually?
Yeah, yes, and that's why I said I needed to talk to professional about that. The some of the things that it's just good sometimes to talk to people, but it was enough that I said, upon my return, the army had things in place to if you needed, some speak to a social worker or psychologist, whatever the case may be, there was some, there was opportunity to do that, and I sought that because I felt I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned, like you had like social workers that like available to you and stuff. And so my question is like, so do the soldiers have like specific, services offered to them where they can, seek help for their traumas or PTSD or any sort of thing that they might have brought back from war? And if so, like how accessible are they for those like the soldiers?
Well, things have improved, thank God, a lot. So, initially in the conflict in Afghanistan, I was, after 2003, I was back part of the army, but I had not yet deployed. But I know, like, at the end of our tour, everyone leaving Afghanistan would be taken to Cyprus, the island there, to a hotel, and they called it decompression leave. We'd spend about 6 days there. And then half of the day was spent getting some, training, some classes on psychological, trauma, post-traumatic stress, all these things, basically, and the opportunity to talk to some professionals that were there, critical incident debrief, people, social workers, and stuff like that. So you would do that about half a day, and the other half a day was just leisure, kind of like telling everyone, your tour's over, just relax, enjoy the scenery and stuff, and then, play a bit of sports, whatever, do some sightseeing. So that was very important. And also, landing in Canada, you kind of go through a process of, before you're sent home on leave, they do ask you, do you want to speak to a social worker? Do you want to speak to you're asked these things, and so you have the opportunity to do that. Where it lacked a little bit. So I think for regular soldiers, they all go back to the same army base, and there's a lot of things usually on an army base that are available. There's a local drop-in center, there's some usual hospital on the base, and things were set up. As the war progressed in Afghanistan, things got better and better. There was a lot of resources for, a whole unit coming back to the base. But, Afghanistan was very much augmented the mission there by reservists who were plucked from all over Canada, sometimes from a small town, and then when they get back home, they go back home, where they live and work. And then the support then is not necessarily close by or immediately available. And then that gets enough. And some people kind of, like for me, because even though I live in Brampton, Ontario, my regiment was in Guelph, and Guelph, that unit kind of belongs to what's called the brigade that is based in London, Ontario. Well, every time I needed something medical or whatever, they would say, you need to go to London. Well, that's 2 hours away, and if I'm to go there, it's not like I can just tomorrow morning get up and go. I'd have to take a day off, drive my car for 2 hours, go there, come back, be a whole day thing. I lose a day's pay and stuff. So I had a lot of support from my employer, but I can imagine someone who's self-employed or works for a small employer, the boss could say, listen, I can't just give you a day off because you want to talk to a social worker, So reservists in general, I think, certainly were not provided as much support as, regular soldiers,
Mhm.
even though they all went there to do the same job.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, I'm glad to see that it's actually gotten, or hear that it's gotten better over the course of the war and over these years. And obviously they can, there's always room for improvement everywhere, right? But after you came back, what helped you deal and come to terms with some of the mental repercussions of war? So whether it be family, like I know you talked about the services that you seeked out, and yeah, so.
Yeah. So, coming back to my unit as a reservist was, there were others in my unit who also served, and you do develop a bit of a kinship. It really helps to talk to other people who also had experiences there and stuff. And my employer was very supportive of us when we came back. There was 5 of us from Peel Police who all went there at the same time. I wasn't the only one, and the chief was very supportive of our family and stuff, and us when we came back. And also my unit was very supportive, my home unit, in Guelph. And I would say friends, families, all that, very, very supportive. Everyone happy that I got back, and just talking about it and stuff helps a lot. The worst I think you can do is, if you're suffering, to isolate yourself or to try to self-medicate. There's horror stories about, soldiers who, they felt they had no one to talk to, and then they self-medicate with alcohol or drugs, and, then you enter a tailspin that can lead to suicide or tragic, or so. To me, I there was some struggles, but overall it was, like I said, not to the point where I couldn't work. And I know that I could have taken a much longer vacation when I came back, but I didn't. I was eager to go back to work, get back in my routine of, going to work and playing hockey and then just get back to normal life, friends, family and stuff. So.
And so, like, I know you did like different things to kind of help you ground yourself again and stuff. So based on that, like, what advice could you give to, like, returning soldiers that are coming back from war, or maybe even veterans who might be dealing with this sort of thing still, but like they haven't really sought help for that?
Yeah, so I would say surround yourself with people that you feel comfortable speaking about those things. Brotherhood, sisterhood of veterans is very strong, and that, to me, that's the best people that you can surround yourself with, because you hear those veterans who really struggle. They'll always say, I have no one understands me. I can't talk about these things with my civilian friends, because they don't understand. They haven't lived it. They don't know what I'm talking about. So surround yourself with other veterans that you can speak about these things. There's a reason why legions were created after World War, because the veterans felt they needed a place to get together to talk, and then to reminisce and about lost friends and things like that. So I think that's the most important thing, is to not isolate yourself thinking that you're suffering alone. Surround yourself with people that you trust, that you can talk to about these things, and that helps tremendously, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And now we're like kind of looking at the other side of things. What about advice for soldiers who are going on a tour soon or are soon to be deployed?
Yeah, so I don't know what I would say, but I would say, like, don't get mired in loneliness. Is a very, probably the worst enemy for a soldier. It did help a lot that we were able, even though we're completely across the world, that we were able to stay connected with family. We had access to email, and we were able to make phone calls and stuff, where, opposed to when I went to Bosnia in the mid-90s, the internet didn't exist, and we could only make a phone call of about 10 minutes every 3 weeks, and it was very hard to stay connected, and you felt very, very lonely, and loneliness can lead to depression. And that's the worst enemy for a soldier, right? It's, you don't want to be depressed and thinking there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You usually work physically hard. You don't get a lot of sleep. It wears down at you. So I would say to a young soldier, take the time, eat healthy, stay fit, talk to your friends over there, and always remember, this is 6 months, 10 months, whatever the case may be. You will come home. You will come back to your regular life. Don't get mired in the immediate, thinking that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. There is, it will go fast, and you will come back and be the person you were before. So that's, by staying fit, stay eating healthy, not abuse alcohol and drugs and things like that, helps you to be stronger, to battle these things, like depression and stuff. Everyone knows alcohol is a depressant, so I may feel good in the moment, but Afghanistan was a dry place. Soldiers could not drink anyway, but it wasn't like that before. I know when I went to Bosnia, we were allowed to consume alcohol. There was a limit, but you could consume it, and then that led to some abuse. So there are good reasons why you shouldn't let soldiers drink in conflict.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I mean, at the end of the day, healthy body, healthy mind type of thing. So that's part of the, the whole thing of this club, making sure that people understand that, which is it's like your health. It's mainly the overall, you can't just look at one aspect of the things, you have to look at everything. And so, I guess with that being said and everything, do you have any last words or anything that you would like to share with us before we end this interview?
No, not really. I mean, I'm happy to talk to both of you. I don't know too much about your association or your club, but it sounds like a very good endeavor. Like you said, having a healthy mind and a healthy body, those two go hand in hand, right? If you're not well here, even though you could be a very fit person, that's not going to work out for you, and vice versa. You can't, if you might, you're not going to be happy if you're not happy the way you look and things like that. So I think those things go hand in hand and help build resilience. That's what it's about. I think, to be resilient, we all go through tough times in life. No different, soldiers. Yeah. Okay. But, everyone goes through you will go through some tough periods in your life. No one's immune from that. And the idea is to be resilient and to build resilience. And how do you do that? Well, I think a big part of it is, have a healthy social life, stay healthy if you can, physically fit, mentally. These things are all go towards building some resiliency, so that when you go through tough times, you can weather it better than others. So
yeah. And thank you so much for your cooperation and answering these questions. I know sometimes it can be emotional to talk about, but we really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. My pleasure.
And I guess before you go, I would invite you to tomorrow to check out the other interview that we did. We interviewed somebody, an old lady who her grandfather and her father had participated in World War I and then World War II as well. So I would recommend you to kind of go and check out the outside perspective of maybe the people around, how they interacting, come back, something that maybe you might be interested in looking at. For sure.
Yeah, for sure. I will. Thank you.
I'll send you an email afterwards, just linking you to your interview as well as the other interview on our website and Instagram page and all of that, just so you can check it out and see what we're more about as well. But yeah, it was really good talking to you today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Good luck.
Appreciate it.